Today's episode has been requested by quite a few people, and I am so happy to say, my friends, the time has come. Today's guest has been a longtime friend of mine. His name is Lou Phillips. Now, Lou and I met in college, and then coming right out of college, we ended up doing the same ministry tour, and we're on the road for an entire year. Now, Lou ended up staying on that tour for 2 more years, and then his life took a wild turn because he ended up going to Oxford University in England. Yes, you heard that right. He spent a year there studying theology and got his certificate of theology from Oxford University, and also spent his time training at what's called ACA, the Oxford Center of Christian Apologetics. He is currently a global speaker for RZIM, which is short for Ravi Zacharias International Ministries, and he specializes in speaking on topics such as meaning, identity, and purpose, and how they relate to the Christian worldview. Now, as a result of this conversation is primarily geared towards quote-unquote believers and Christians, specifically, how can I remain content and happy while being single when marriage seems to be displayed to us as the singular end-all be-all. Now, the reason I chose Lou to be the person that speaks about being content in your quote-unquote singleness is because for the past 29 years of his life, Lou has lived as a single man, so he has a lot of wisdom to impart to all of us. But hold on, because if you're married, I think this conversation is actually also going to be incredibly valuable for you, because Lou also dives into the meaning of marriage from a biblical standpoint, and we discuss tangible ways in which you can understand how to come alongside and best support your single friends. If you are watching this on YouTube, then you are probably going to realize pretty quick that the footage seems to appear blurry, and for that, I sincerely apologize. I'm so embarrassed. For some reason, the camera did not autofocus for this whole conversation, so I hope you can just use your imagination with this to pretend that you're watching this conversation from behind a foggy window, or like you just forgot to put your glasses on. But no, seriously, I'm so sorry, and I'm going to do my best to make sure it does not happen again. So crazy enough, I only intended to do 1 episode with Lou, but our conversation got so deep and so rich that we ended up talking for nearly 2 hours straight. So I'm actually breaking this up into a part 1 and part 2 to follow within the next 2 weeks. So this is, of course, part 1. Now, I did want to give some context because multiple times in this conversation, Lou uses the word sexuality, and I want to give the full framework so you understand exactly what he's talking about. Because when Lou uses the term sexuality, in summary, he's just saying all-encompassing sexual desire. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page from the beginning. And so, hey, without further ado, you know how excited I am. Let's dig into this extremely valuable conversation I have with my friend Lou on how to be content and happy in your singleness, and also the meaning of marriage. So this is a special episode because, Lou, I don't know if you knew this, but when I started the podcast, in the introduction, I talked about how the first time I ever had a meal date on campus, I had cue cards in my pocket with questions because I was so nervous because I wasn't used to engaging in conversation. Did you know you were my first meal date? Did you know I had cue cards in my pocket? Yes.
I really didn't.
And we're still friends today. Would you believe it?
That's so weird.
I know. I was so weird. That's why I do this podcast, is that so people don't have to be as weird as I was.
What do you mean cue card? You had questions in your... I don't remember.
Straight up. Swear. Like, I literally had a couple questions in my pocket that I would refer down to if I thought that the conversation was going to be dead air. Yeah.
Wow. Did you have to use them?
No, never.
Oh, thank God.
So,
I'm so glad I was able to hear some conversation.
Am I still even in frame? Yes, I am.
Yeah, you are.
Okay.
You're good.
Great. So, Lou and I have been friends for years, since college, which has been almost 8 years, I think.
It probably would have been 2010.
Yes.
Because that would have been you were a freshman and I was a sophomore. Yeah, that's when we met.
We were little babies.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
We weren't even in our 20s yet. And now look at us.
Yeah.
You're a grown man.
Thank you.
I'm just me. So, Lou, today we're going to be talking about how to be happy, joyful, content, all the words, in singleness.
Yeah.
Because I get so many questions on this. And being single myself, I can tell you that this is a problem because it's Hallmark Christmas movie watching season.
Sure.
And I feel like I'm not like my birthday, Thanksgiving, they're all happening. And I'm just like, I just want one birthday, one Thanksgiving where I'm with somebody else. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like this is worse for girls, but I mean, I'm only speaking on behalf of girls, so I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And that would be the first thing I would say is like it is going to be significantly more difficult for girls and women, I think, in the society we live in, especially even Christian culture, for sure. You are told from a very young, I mean, not even just Christian culture. Look at Disney. Look at every movie that's presented your way.
Yes.
Is that as a woman, as a girl, your life is incomplete until you have that one person.
For sure.
There's an aspect of that for guys as well. It's just not nearly to the level. And that's you can see that historically. You can see it for a variety of reasons. So, yeah, I think finding contentment within singleness is difficult on its own. Then you have the level of pressure from family and society and everything else around you saying, specifically as a woman, you're not complete without a husband or it's just crazy. So
true.
Yeah.
And you know what's interesting about you is that up until this point, at this age, you have lived single as a single man. And like if you're watching the YouTube, like you're attractive, so people would be like, "This is weird. Yeah. Why are you single and attractive and not dating? And like why are you choosing to do this to yourself?"
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So address that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I grew up with, so I grew up with a big family. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. All my siblings are married. Yeah. All of them have kids. I got 13 nieces and nephews. I think the oldest any of my siblings were 25 years old when they got married. I'm 29 now. One, I think the Lord's just given me a disposition. I remember very young just being told, this is the ring I've always worn. My dad gave me this ring when I was 13 and just said, hey, this is how I expect you to act as a man, and this is actually how God expects you to act as a man, is to respect women, to know that your sexuality was designed for one woman in the context of marriage. And so I took that very seriously. I didn't do that perfectly by any means, but I knew that this was a very serious thing. And so when I was in high school, I just saw the harm and the heartache that happened from it. I didn't actually see the beauty. I saw the fun. I don't get me wrong, but I saw friends become enemies. I'm like, there's something more to our sexuality. And I was like, I'm still trying to figure this one out. And I was also very academically driven, so I was like, I ain't got time for a girlfriend. In many ways, same with college. And but what I've found is that, gosh, there's something so beautiful about singleness, and there's something so beautiful about marriage. And I think we pit the two against each other when actually the Bible describes them both as very beautiful ways to live your life. I don't know how to explain this other than I really do believe Christ is the bread of life. I found him to be satisfactory, like in my own heart. Like there is a contentment that I think only the Lord has brought me. And I don't find that to be shallow. I'm like, I really mean this. Do I want to be married? Yes, it is a huge desire of mine. I would love to have a wife and kids. And if God gives me that, praise his name. Yeah. But if he doesn't, and I mean every bit of this, if he doesn't, and he says, Lou, I want you to live the rest of your life single for my name's sake, I say praise his name. And I've seen both the beauty of those things. And I think the Lord's just given me examples in my life to see, like we're currently at my brother's house right now. Marriage is hard. Yeah. It's like, it's beautiful, and this is not taking, but I think we often get such an idealized view of it.
I just want the fireworks, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like Disney World.
And it's there, but so you and I have talked about this before, but there's an inner angst to our soul that our sexuality, our romantic life, just will not satisfy. Right. And I've actually heard you say this. It's almost like eating, it's like eating something but not swallowing, and it's like
you're never full.
Yeah, you're never full because you're just chewing eating something. You're spitting it back out because you're not actually digesting it. That's what I think. If you place your identity, if you place this lived experience, like I'm going to be fulfilled here within even romance, even a godly relationship. That's the craziest thing. Even a godly relationship, it will not do it. God has designed you to receive his affirmation, his love, his acceptance, and that's the only thing that's going to satisfy you. Yeah. So yeah. Sorry, I don't know if I actually answered the question. No. I'm doing this. Sorry, I think I'm single right now because ultimately this is where I think God's called me. The way I honor God right now in singleness is to be celibate, to treat women the way that God has designed me to treat, in the way he's talked about women and how I don't see them as objects. And until that changes, until I meet someone that I believe The best way I've seen like how you choose a spouse, this is by Tim Keller. He talks about it's almost like you see someone, you see what God is doing in their life, and you say, I want to come alongside that. Not here would be somebody that would really really go well with me.
Yeah.
Here's someone that could really just uphold. No, it's like I want to look at somebody and be like, man, I see what God is doing, and I want to come alongside
Just
you in
running.
that. Yeah, you want to run together. It's
Yeah.
like, how do we wreck this world for the kingdom? That's like my line for like what I want in a wife. It's like
Yeah.
I want somebody that is so serious, that is so in love with Christ, so in love with God, that ultimately she doesn't need me, yet we are complementary, or we're complementary, and
Yeah.
that we desire to live this life alongside each other in order to do the most we can for His name's sake. Yeah.
You said you felt like this is where like God has called you. And what I like about what you said is you didn't say season of singleness. Because this is where I think it's harmed me.
Yeah.
Okay? Because like being someone that's been single for, I mean, I only had my first relationship this past summer, and that was at 28 years old. Like, what if someone's season of singleness isn't like a season, it's your entire life.
Sure.
Until, and I feel like it's been challenging in that arena, because hearing someone say, what if you're called to singleness, is like saying, this is terminal.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like, it's like someone just said,
so
you have
true.
cancer.
It's so true.
And
yeah.
why do we have that perspective? How can we change the narrative on that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to start. So I'm going to speak from a Christian standpoint, just
Sure.
because I am a Christian, and I can be the most critical of that more than anything else. I can't tell society what I think it needs to do. I can tell you what I think the church needs to do. One, we need to take singleness very seriously, and we need to stop treating singles as in they're this weird station of life before they get started.
Right.
And that starts with the sermons we preach. That starts with the groups we form. That starts with the way we talk about marriage. How many church services or churches have you been a part of that have done a series on marriage? And how many of them have done a series on singleness?
Right.
I can't name a church that's done a singleness. Why? Because we've believed the lie that it's not God's plan. I mean, the amount of times when I speak on singleness that I have a Christian come up to me talking about, no, that's not what God, like singleness isn't what God would have. I'm like, well, you have to completely revoke all the words of Paul when he talks about singleness, because he actually talks about, it's like, I wish all of you were single, because
Exactly.
you can actually devote your life. But he doesn't say that in saying because marriage is bad. He's like, no, there's just a way to devote yourself to the Lord. And then you'd have to completely diminish the whole ministry of Christ as a single man. It's like, it's ridiculous. It is a beautiful way to live, but we have to actually, what I think we need to do is we need to uphold singleness and bring marriage down.
Yeah.
Not to bring marriage down to a level it's not. No, just bring it down to its proper level, which is, here's a good gift by God. But just like every good gift, if we don't use it in its proper context, if we elevate it, if we choose to worship the gift versus the giver, that's idolatry. Because idolatry can still be good things.
Yeah.
We think idolatry is like worshiping the cow, this ridiculous, like not God-given gift. No, it's sometimes even the God-given gifts. But when we desire that thing over the giver himself, which is, that's our heart. We're constantly wanting something that's not God.
Yeah.
We have to change that. And that's going to take some time, but I think it's going to start with the church and the way we treat singles. Like, here's a great example. When we're in church, when we're gathering people, maybe not leading with the question, well, when are you going to get married?
Yeah.
When you meet a single that's in their upper 20s. Like, what kind of hell are they living in when every time they go to church, somebody's just wondering, well, when are you going to start your life?
Yeah.
It's the weird thing when people assume you're not fulfilled. And so, I would say there's so much more into that, but that's something to start with, is the church and how we need to start talking about singleness and how we need to elevate it to where it's proper status.
Yeah, got you. What could individuals do better? Like what can we do, whether you're, let's just keep it even more broad. Whether you're a Christian or not, how can you actually live a life that's like, you know what, I don't care however long the season is. Like, what if we just not started calling it not a season? Like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm single. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
How long, kind of thing. But what's an actionable step that you've been able to take in your life that has helped you be content when so many people around you who are in that same sphere could not be?
Yeah. Oh, great question. So I don't know how to not answer this question without going to Christianity, because it's my only answer. And
Sure.
I realize people listening to this could be like, I'm not a Christian, so this is kind of pointless. But like, the contentment that we're searching for, the fulfillment we were designed to have, I think can only come from the God who's created us.
Yeah.
And there are even those that are Christian that are still trying to find it elsewhere and still not satisfied. So I'm not saying that once you become Christian, you won't struggle with this. Clearly, there's still, but the reasons why we struggle with it is because we're actually going for the things that are false forms of God. It's not actually because we're going to the thing itself. The only thing I found even remotely satisfactory in this life and brought me a contentment is to know that there's a God that created this whole thing. And in spite of the way I've lived, he's actually chose to accept me, bring me into his family and say, Lou, you are my son with whom I'm well pleased. Because the Bible describes that when you become a Christian, when you actually give your life to Christ and repent of your sin, you are now clothed in his righteousness. And, for years I never understood that. I didn't understand why that's such a big deal. But what's so crazy about that and so scandalous is this idea that, gosh, when you become a Christian, God actually now views you in the perfection of his son. So you don't go to him as this broken. He doesn't see you as the broken, flawed person you are. He actually sees you as in perfection, and he chooses to accept you, and that's a beautiful thing. From there, I can then start looking at the world, even especially with sexuality, where it's like, man, that looks amazing, and I want that. But knowing that my Father in heaven is not withholding any good gift from me.
Ooh, come on. Yeah.
He's not. And that's that is the right from the get-go. What is the first thing we see in the Bible? It's us questioning God. Yeah, but do you really have what's best for me?
Yeah.
Because I feel like you're holding something behind your back, and I feel like I need to grab it. I feel like I need to grab this because I feel like you're not being truthful. I feel like you're holding something back. And what do we see? It actually caused destruction. God is not withholding any good gift from you. Though it may seem that way, and though it can be difficult, he's actually offering himself. And the only thing that has actually satisfied my own heart, this existential angst in my heart, is as if like, what am I here for? Do I have any value in itself? Or is it's only the value that I produce? No, God actually corrects all that and says, no, you have value simply because I've created you. You're created in my image, and I deem you my son. That type of contentment allows it to go into my singleness and saying, though I want something good, I don't, like a spoiled kid, get to be like, but I get this. It's like, no, Lord, whatever you would have me do, because you've proven yourself faithful and over again. It's kind of a sidestep, but you'll get why I'm going there. I used to be really addicted to pornography. Like, this is something that was a huge part of my life because, I wasn't sleeping around. I wasn't doing all these things. So I'm the right Christian kid, but, this is okay because I'm not actually having sex, right? And I remember when the Lord actually just convicted me. I was actually in college when I felt like, oh my gosh, this has to be dealt with. This is not okay. Because I met married men that were still struggling with pornography. Because I always thought, no, pornography is this thing that married guys don't struggle with. But I bring up that point because when I wanted to get out of that, when I wanted to get out of this toxic mentality of what is sexuality, I had to realistically do some things in my life. Like there were some things I had to cut out in order for me to follow that. And I say that to say some of us entertain the narrative that my life isn't fulfilled without a partner, and yet wonder why we're so unfulfilled. And this may seem harsh, but what films are you watching? Gosh, if you're really struggling with being single and yet you constantly are watching, as you said, the Hallmark Christmas show or these romantic rom, and you're wondering why you feel so angsty, it's because you're watching a film that says you're going to be angsty without this. Like, you have to be very careful into what you watch, what you entertain, and then also the friends you bring around your life. Are the friends around you, do they understand this? Or are they also feeling the same way of like, no, you need to be married to be content? Or are your couples in your life actually inviting you into their families? Because what's the scariest thing about being single? It's not having a partner to share. It's the idea of loneliness. It's like, do I have a family? Do I have And so I think the result of couples and families actually inviting their single friends in, you'd be surprised on what the fulfillment that brings as well with inside families. So
that's so good. And speaking on that, the term contentment, obviously it's just like being okay with it, I think is a very loose way to phrase it. But specifically for you, what are some ways that you would define contentment, or ways you've been able to identify, oh no, I am content? Because what you just presented was a dichotomy. Because you said, I'm content, yet I still want marriage.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
how does that play out for you?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, you're right. It's a dichotomy, but it's not a contradiction.
Right.
And that it's an apparent contradiction because you would think that if you were content, there's no desire.
Yes.
And I would say no. Contentment is this understanding that I know that God is faithful and that he's been faithful over and over and over again in my life, that I can trust him even when it doesn't look like he's doing what I want him to do. There's a quote that says, when we cannot trust God's hand, or no, when it doesn't appear like we can see God's hand, we have to trust his heart. And where do I go for that? I go to the cross every single time. As a Christian, everything hinges on the cross. And what is the cross saying? It's saying that God himself was willing to enter into pain, was willing to enter into suffering, and give up everything for you and I. For anyone that would be willing to bow the knee and say, Lord, I know I'm not good, but I'm willing to accept the forgiveness you have. Like, in the grand scheme of things, though, our life is a vanishing vapor.
Yeah.
Like, think if one thing this year has shown me that is, my gosh, is life so dang quick, and we get so caught up in all these things that we think are going to try, and yet we chase it, and we chase it, and we chase it, and it's like, because the scariest thing in life is not having an answer to the question, what's the meaning of your life?
Wow.
The scariest thing is pursuing the thing you think is the meaning of your life and finding it empty.
Yikes.
And I think...
That's so good.
Thank you. I think we do that with all realms. Sexuality is just one of them. Sexuality is the one that's hyper realized right now because of the world we live in. And I think I've been able to find contentment in saying, I know that God has what's good for me, and he desires that for me. And every time that I've been willing to relinquish control and just give it to him, though he takes me on a different path than I would have thought, it's been more exhilarating, it's been more fulfilling, and I've never looked back.
Wow.
And I say that same thing within sexuality as well. Now, here's the other part of that. The more we've crossed boundaries with the realm of sexuality and then try to live things, it's harder. That's a fact. And I think that's why a lot of people do struggle with this, because maybe you're very, very active with somebody, or maybe you're, and now you're trying to live single. That's really, really hard to do. And I applaud those, because one of my closest friends, as a Christian, he had sex before marriage, and he said, man, I'm so impressed with you, because you've never had sex and all that. And I reversed it. I'm like, dude, I get that, and I thank you, but I was like, in some ways though, I don't know what I'm missing. In a real sense, I have some ideas. I bet it's fun. I have every bit in my mind to think it is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But he actually has, and he was waiting out for years then for his future wife, and then from that point forward, waited until to have sex with his wife. And I told him, I was like, dude, I've been more impressed with you on that, because there's something there where you actually knew, and there's an aspect of sacrifice because it's harder.
Yes.
And so I think the more we keep entertaining relationships and the casual relationships of things and sexual, I think it's more difficult to live. So in contentment, I think one of the reasons I've been so content is I've been very careful about those types of things, because I know that when you kiss somebody, you're not just kissing someone. It's not just something really quick. It means something. And I know that seems probably overly religious or old-fashioned, but no, I'm sorry, I just don't believe it. I think these things mean something, and the more we're willing to deem those things sacred, so that we're honoring the other person as best we can, the more we can actually find the contentment prior to that, because we're saying, I want to find contentment in what God is for me right now.
Yeah.
Knowing that if there is something in the future, that's great. But here's the last thing. If I don't get these things, the reason why I think I can be so content right now, Zoe, is because if I don't get these things, I still get him in the end.
Amazing.
And that's what I was created for.
Yeah.
And I know that's an over-realized, you're like, well, what about now? I've still found the beauty in now. And it's like, gosh, I don't want to get to the end of my life wishing I was just, or don't want to get to the end of my life thinking, gosh, all these, no, it's like you got today. You have no idea what tomorrow brings. Live it to the full and do everything you can. And it's, from my perspective as a Christian, is to honor God with everything I can.
Yeah.
And the craziest thing is that when we do that, there's fulfillment to be found, because he could have made it the opposite. And he didn't. He said, no, follow me, follow the will I have for you. And I really do desire what's good for you. And I found that to be true. And I know there's more to unpack there, but that's what I'd say there.
No, that's profound as it is. So yeah, I think that was perfect. So I think there's this, because you addressed God's timing, right? And I think there's this interesting thing that plays out, and this is me talking and conversations I have with other girls. And there's a little bit of jadedness that comes with the whole, God's perfect timing, because really what we're like is, it's actually a guy's perfect timing, and he's not stepping up and asking me out.
Yeah.
So in your mind, being a man,
Yeah, thank you.
how does this play out for you? And I think we're dipping into this conversation of, why does dating seem to be such a scarce thing that's going on today? And how do we wait on God when it's literally the action step of a guy
Sure.
that's preventing it from happening? Like,
Yeah.
how are we getting the wires crossed here?
Yeah. The first thing I'd say about that is that I would still say that God is related to that, and you can still trust him in that. But you're absolutely right that there's the initiation of a man that's going to step up to actually pursue a woman. And again, that can sound, depending on what your worldview is, you might not think that's necessary.
Yeah.
I think when men actually step up to be men, culture flourishes. And when men cease to be men, when men choose to be boys, quite frankly, we live in a culture that we're currently in.
And define what that looks like to you.
A boy is someone that pursues himself, that chooses to make the easiest decisions, and chooses to see women as objects. That's a boy. I have 13 nieces and nephews. Half of them are boys. They're boys.
Yeah.
They don't understand this yet. Men, this is the way the Bible describes it. If I'm as a man, like this is one of my favorite things in the Bible is when Christ describes what marriage is. He tells the husbands, you are to love your wife as I love the church. Now you can be like, oh great, well Christ really loved the church. No. How did Christ love the church? Who is the church? Well, the church put him on the cross. The church is the one that spat on him. He sought reconciliation with a people that didn't want it. So he says, no matter what I take, I will go after, I will pursue, I will fix. And he laid his life down. If more husbands actually laid their life down, this concept of like complementarity or like the traditional values of Christianity and Christian marriage, they would get thrown out because people would pursue it because it's beautiful.
Wow.
The problem is we don't even see it because most men, not most men, I don't want to say for most men in general, I believe this like, well, I'm the provider. That means I don't have to do anything in the house and my wife does it. It's this real backwards view of like, she serves me. And yet the Bible says, no, you lay your life down for her.
Wow.
You serve her. And when you both serve each other, it's not like, I feel like the biggest lie everybody ever always says like, no, you know what relationship is? It's compromise. I give 50, you give 50 and we'll live. That's a lie from hell. It's 100. You live for the other person. And the only way that happens is if somebody actually gets this concept that like, this life's not about me. Why aren't men doing this right now? Well, I mean, I don't want to be so critical on that. I mean, here I am. I'm single. Now, part of that being single is like, I genuinely haven't felt I met a woman that I'm like, yeah, this is it. Now, I'm not ignorant to say that could also just be like me being overly picky as to what I want. I don't know. Like I'm working that myself. I don't think I've figured this out entirely, but I will say I've done everything I could to do this with as much intentionality as possible. I think it's really hard right now to make decisions when the world shows you that you have the whole world at your disposal.
Yeah.
Let's go back 20, 50 years. You want to know why people got married so young? Well, you lived in a town and you were told, like, this is the people you'll meet. Just find your wife here.
Yep.
Right? And
Yep.
you made decisions. The craziest things, some of those marriages are stronger than the ones now when you get to find the perfect person on dating website, everything. It's like, so I think one of the reasons why men aren't stepping up is it because there's this lie that tells you, yeah, but there's more out there. Are you sure you want to settle for this one? Very, very. It's treating it as a commodity. It's sickening. I'm guilty of it myself. I mean, it is a terrible lie. It's in the water that we swim and drink. It's like no. There's the world that you can have. Like, look at Instagram. There's so many. Like, that's a lie,
Yeah.
but we believe it because the world is. We're a global village anymore, right?
Yep.
You can get anywhere in the world within 24 hours. That's
Exactly.
crazy. This
Yeah.
is the first time in human history we're going to do that. So there's that aspect of it, and then also I think. Stepping up to be a man is a really selfless thing. And there's not a lot of examples of men being selfless. There's not a lot of men actually sacrificially leading people.
Yeah.
And it's hard to emulate something you've never seen. And so I think, again,
Wow,
sorry,
that's-
I'm gonna keep going back to Christianity and the church, but
Yeah.
like, gosh, if we need more men to show younger men and younger boys what it looks like to serve their families and their wives and to actually pursue. And I think the Bible lays that out beautifully.
Yeah.
I mean, all throughout Scripture, God refers to himself as the bridegroom that woos the church to him, right? Well, what does that look like? Well, I think that does step up to, there's a variety of ways to interpret that, but it's hard, and I don't want to be overly critical with guys. It's a hard thing to do because then there's the fear of rejection. Like there's a lot of insecurity going on. It's not just simply like,
Yeah.
And I'd say the last thing is I think pornography is playing a massive role. Sorry. I mean, okay, so relationships are difficult. They're messy, and we all know this.
Yep.
What happens when you can get your sexual gratification from something you can do in your bedroom without the person and the messiness of it?
Yeah.
you want a world that starts changing. We need to stop treating pornography as this like, it's kind of a funny thing that men and women do, but it's not that harmful.
Yeah.
It is destructive. It is destroying people's lives, and we treat it as something like it's not the big of a deal. And that's not even talking about the sex trafficking aspect of it. This is just talking about the individual. And you don't even have to be a Christian believer. I mean, look at what Russell Brand is saying about it.
Yeah.
Look at people like Terry Crews and a bunch of people, like all these people that would not identify as Christian. I don't know about some of them. They're not Christian. They're just saying this is harmful because it tells you something about sexuality that's not true, and it allows you to distance people from your own heart. And it's just like, yeah, I wish I had a better answer. But I do think, speaking to other, Christian girls specifically that are saying no, they are waiting for it. God is ultimately sovereign, and it's not like he's like, I had this guy, he just hasn't stepped up. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there's no asset, there's no plan B with God. Like if it was plan B, you'd be on plan Z. Let's be real. Like we've all messed up so much. So you don't have to worry about that. That's where you push into Christ. That's where you push into God more and just saying, gosh, that is frustrating. But he knows these things. Yeah. And he is the one that can orchestrate it all. And that is orchestrating it all. So I think you can still trust him in this, even though it's quite difficult. And I pray that men in this country, men in this world will actually step up to be more men, and that that's going to take time. Yeah. And that's not me blaming all men. There's absolutely problems on the other side as well. But I can only speak from a male standpoint. Yeah.
So I want to talk from the other side on that and ask you a question because I really don't know. So it seems like you are in the camp of believing men should always be the one to initiate and pursue. Is that correct? From the jump. So from the very beginning.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, yeah. I'm not saying if a woman pursues you, I don't think that's like sinful or not. Okay. I'm not saying that. Yeah. I just think it allows men to operate in the way they were designed, which is actually to lay their life down. And that what is one of the ways you lay your life down. You pursue and you actually be the sacrifice. Like you're sacrificially doing the hard part, not putting that on somebody else. So if there's a an independent woman that goes ever, that's fine. I'm not saying you're not allowed to do that. Yes. I do think that's not the way it was designed. But like we're operating in a broken, fallen world.
Yeah. So 2 side questions from that, because I talked about the initial thing men should do. But I think there's this stigma, and I've absolutely fallen prey to this. Yeah. And it's actually bit me in the butt, and I'll explain. Because it's been like the guy pursues, and then the guy needs to always pursue. So, to the point that the guy's like, do you even like me? Sure. And then I'm like, yes, but you're supposed to pursue. And they're like, oh my God, I got to do all this. And it's just like, where do we find that healthy balance? Like, men does the initial pursuit, okay? And then I guess before we even get to that point, I want to know, will men pursue if there is enough reasonable doubt that the girl may not like them, or do they need to have an inkling first? Okay, I can tell she likes me, now I'm going to proceed.
Yeah, that's it. That's going to be personality trait. That's going to be personality type, so I wish I had a solid answer. Now, I'm, again, I've been a fairly confident individual in a lot of ways, and so I'm gonna know beforehand. Yeah. And the times that I have even just talked with girls that I was interested in, like I knew beforehand what the answer was. I think a lot of guys are, and I have these friends, like they're genuinely they're gonna put their heart out on their sleeve and they're gonna do it, and they've gotten rejected so much, and so they're a little bit scarred. Like, it's funny, girls talk about, I just want a guy that's so sweet and kind, and yet, let's be honest, a lot of them pursue some of the biggest jerks. Like, can you be that angry with these nice guys when they're trying everything they can, but every girl is like, no, I want this bad boy, because guess who taught you that one? I don't know, society. Like, you want a guy that's going to treat you right, that respects you, that pursues you, that's romantically, like going after you in a sense of romance, and yet you choose the guy that's a complete jerk all the time, but he's attractive and other people want him. It's like, well, there's some mixed views on that one. Like that's hard. It's hard enough, but I think there's definitely an aspect of like, it's hard to put yourself out there. It's hard to be like, gosh, I don't want to be rejected, because what is that? Nobody wants rejection. Like, it's one of our greatest fears. Yeah. It's for someone to know who we are and say no. It's like, that sucks. Like, I want to be accepted for him. And so it is hard. I think one of my favorite quotes of any movie And this is actually my favorite movie is We Bought a Zoo. Surprising, I know. It's not that good.
I love that.
It's such a good film. I know it's not insanely deep, but one of the things he says to his son, and I don't think this just can be applied to relationships, he says, sometimes in life, all you need is 20 seconds of insane courage.
Dude, that literally Bob Goff talks about this exact quote.
Bob Goff, he took it from that film. But
Yeah.
it's one of my favorite one of my favorite quotes because it's just true. That's a thing in life. I think so many of us, regarding our walk with Christ, we're afraid to take risks. We're afraid to jump out. And I will just say this, every time I've taken risks, even if it didn't turn out the way that I wanted it, I was better for it. C.S. Lewis talks about, and I don't have the quote well, but it's like, he talks about like, yeah, you know, you want to not get hurt, then yeah, box your heart up, but then it'll eventually turn callous and cold and it won't even work. So, you know, when we put ourselves out there, there's always the opportunity for hurt.
Yeah.
Well, thank God there's a God of healing. And
Yes.
I'm not saying like it's going to go perfectly, but you don't have to worry about those things. If you are, I do think some guys, when it's clearly obvious, like this chick just doesn't like you, we're like, yeah, but I'm going to do the courageous thing. It's like, that to me is actually just being foolish. There's a proper way to figure out when somebody likes you, but I can't.
Don't even go further. How?
Sorry.
What's the proper way of that?
I think one of the best ways to actually begin relationships, and this is going to be counter to I think a lot of things, is actually becoming friends with somebody.
Oh my God, you have to know a person first.
It's crazy. I know. Actually become friends with that person and get to know them with zero physicality. And that's darn near impossible today because one of the first things we do when we date somebody, first date, is let's make out. I got to figure out if we're sexually compatible.
Yeah.
And it is one of the biggest lies. If you go to that when things are different and you can't even hold conversations, if you don't even enjoy, like, this is the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with if you're going to believe that marriage is ultimately till death, right? Do you just like being around this person? Is this someone that you can just share a conversation with, your deepest, darkest fears? Is this somebody that you can be friends with? I think far too many times we give up on people immediately. Like, okay, the way we treat dating, we walk into a room and what are we doing? We're assessing the room.
I mean, the same with dating apps. They're so visually driven.
You assess the room, and I think in doing that, we actually immediately disqualify that. These people would be amazing partners in our lives because if we grew to know them as friends, and that attraction would grow. And this is not me saying that attraction isn't important. Attraction is very important. You were designed to then be attracted to people, and I think in many ways you should be attracted to that person. But we all know good and well, like if you know anybody that's married, the infatuation phase, it leaves. Like. Very, very harsh statement, but I'm willing to say this because I have a friend that was a male model, and he was one of my good friends, and I was talking to him about the modeling industry, and he talks about just how toxic that place was. And he says, and I won't use the language he said, but he says, what's crazy about, a woman's beauty or someone that you're really attracted to, he's like, you find me the most beautiful woman in the world, and I'll show you someone that someone else is tired of having sex with.
Wow.
Even the most beautiful person in the world, someone has left that person before. It's like, it's just true. Like, the sexual allure of things, guys, it changes. You get older. Gravity wins. We're no longer... Like, if you're going to build a relationship on that, and I don't think we realize we do that without... It's our default setting. Am I physically attracted to this person? Yes, there needs to be attraction there. But the better question is, are you friends with this person?
Yeah.
Is there a connection? It's like, do you like similar things? Do you have the same vision for life? Not as in you want to do the same things, but like, are you both gung-ho about what is this life about? What are we pursuing? That type of thing. I think you have the ability of producing a very, very strong relationship because I think the lie we've believed is there's that unicorn out there. Real quickly, just think of that logic for 1 second. If there actually is this one person that was created for you, it only takes one person to jack up the rest of the chain. Like, one person marries the wrong person, and that person marries, and now everybody's, it's the butterfly effect. You mess up like, it's a ridiculous statement. I'm not saying that there aren't, maybe God's designed, like, you want to know who the person God willed for you to be married to? The one you're married to. Like, you don't have to, like, you want to have
some Inception.
Oh, so yeah,
right
it's the one, like, stop over analyzing this thing. It's like, I really don't believe there's this unicorn out there. It's like, she was designed for it. There's a lot of people like, the question is, are you going to choose to love that person even when you don't like them? And that's the hardest thing because we're broken and relationships aren't perfect.
Yeah.
But the marriages that I've loved the most, gosh, are the ones that they're so, they're so solid in who they are as a person prior.
Yeah.
They love the Lord more than anything else. And then the person that they choose to serve and love them. on both sides. And it's like, gosh, that's what I'm wanting. That's what we want. And you know, is that when we were actually traveling, it's a weird thing to say, but whatever. Doing a show, but all the guys were staying at this one guy's house. He's like in his 60s, and he told us, he said, our romantic life has never been better. And I'm like, what? It's like a 60-year-old. Like, what are you talking about? Like, how's that possible?
Yeah.
Well, if sex really is more about the physicality of it, it's more than that, but it's about the intimacy that can come. I mean, I don't think it's ironic that every other month we get a magazine that's saying, you know, 20 more tips on how to make the best sex life.
Yeah.
I mean, shouldn't we have figured that one out? Like, we've been doing it since we've existed.
Yeah.
You're telling me we have not figured out, here, if you do this, this, and this, best sex life, and yet all of us are still not satisfied.
Yeah.
Like, it's not technique. It's more than that. There's intimacy, and that intimacy can only come when you're sharing your life with this person, and they know without a shadow of doubt that you're going to be there.
Wow.
Because you're afraid you're not going to be trusting with somebody that you know is going to leave you.
Yeah.
This is why marriage has the potential of producing such beautiful intimacy.
Yeah. So, two topics we hit on side, because I want to get back to that and close those boxes really quick. The physicality portion. Am I correct in following the train of thought that you think one of the best ways to learn how to not overlook, see beyond
absolutely,
physicality is actually becoming friends with someone first?
Yeah.
Which takes the pressure off of it being like this dating scenario. Are they going to be my husband? Are they going to be my wife? Yes, no. Because you're looking at all of those things up front.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, can I just say real quick, I realize sometimes it doesn't work that way. Sometimes you're just so attracted. You're both attracted to each other. Boom. You start. That's fine. I was saying specifically for those that you're just not sure, you're trying to figure it out, or like you don't even know how to become friends with that person.
Yeah.
And you'll know.
Yeah.
Like you will. And there's always going to be the risk when you have to ask that girl out. But like, again, I think you can go in there with a better understanding if you're willing to become friends with that person and know where they're at. Yeah,
and I mean that seems logical from the standpoint of if you can look at someone who you end up dating, but you've been friends prior for whatever amount of time, and you can still be like, how can I not have fun anytime I see you?
Yeah.
Like that shows. Yeah. That's so much more than meets the eye in that scenario. Yeah. So that's cool.
Yeah. Why do you think relationships typically when they break off are so like toxic?
Yeah.
Well, because they started really physical. It's really hard to still be friends with somebody that you slept with.
Yeah.
I mean, it just is. Like, it's really difficult because your relationship was built on physicality. Well, guess what? There's no more physicality because you're not dating anymore. So what are you anymore? You're nothing. You're not friends.
Yeah.
You literally were people that just slept with each other. It's like, well, no wonder that's hard.
That's so
like
good.
Build friendships and then avoid the physicality until you're sure that here's somebody, and even I mean, we can talk about that more. How does that grow?
Yeah.
But yeah, make sure you're not actually crossing boundaries with somebody that you don't even know what you're gonna like. What does the future look like here?
Okay, I'll let you go there real quick.
Okay.
What would you say to someone who's like, well, I don't know if I'm attracted to them unless I make out with them?
I'm sorry. You may feel that way because of the way you've lived this life so far, and I think we can desensitize ourselves by the way we live, and we can like maybe this is your MO that you make out with that person,
which is literally MO abbreviated.
Sorry, I forgot that you make out. That's great. Yeah, maybe that is your MO. I will say I think that's extremely cheap. I think you've really cheapened who that person is to question whether you can actually find if they're attractive or if they're good based off of how you feel when you make out with them. Because here's the thing, we're taught like sexual compatibility. Like you have to make sure you're sexually compatible with somebody.
Yep.
One, holy crap, what a terrible way to view a human. I mean, you've actually just turned that man, you've actually just turned that woman into, quite frankly, a commodity. It is best price at the best offer is what it is. What can you offer me? And is this like, it's a market. You're going out there. It's the market of dating kind of thing. Wow. And here's the other craziest thing. Your sexual compatibility will change. So if you think you're sexually compatible with somebody and that's just going to stay for the rest of your life, you don't understand sexuality. Things about you change. Things that turn you on change. Ask somebody that's been married for 50 years. You will change. And so this concept that you are going to be sexually compatible with somebody for the rest of your life is just ridiculous. Things will change about you. You will physically change. She will physically change. And so to cheapen someone and say, are we physically compatible? I just think it's ridiculous. So I get it, man. Like, especially when you're attracted to somebody, what is the first thing? Yeah, you do want to make out with them, and I'm not saying that's not a. I'm not. This is not a sinful desire.
Yeah.
You're designed to, but I think there's a better way to figure out who that person is and to figure out if this is something, because you can be. I can't tell you how many girls I've been attracted to that would have been terrible relationships with me. And what was the first thing I wanted to do with that girl? Absolutely, make out with her.
Yeah.
But you refrain from doing that because you're trying to, you treat her not simply as something that offers something to you, but as an entity in herself, something that's actually created in the image of God that I do not want to violate the sacredness of.
That's so great. Cheapen who they are. I love that you said that. And cheapening who you are
Yeah,
as well.
it is. Yeah, it really is. You're revealing your cards when the first thing you want to do with a girl or a boy is to make out with them. What you're saying is that the physicalness of this relationship actually trumps the who you are.
Yep. Yeah.
And I know that seems harsh, and it probably seems, no, that's ridiculous. I don't think, and I'm willing to debate that. I'm willing to talk to somebody that feels differently, but I really do think that's actually.
I'll give them your Instagram so they can debate you in the
great.
DMs.
I get enough hate mail there, so please go ahead. I don't speak on topics that people like approve of anyway, so I'm constantly getting berated. So yeah, send me an email.
You're like, it's so at.
So yeah, exactly.
So I opened this a little bit, but let's go back there real quick.
Yeah.
Summary. Guys pursue, then the dating relationship happens. What are some easy ways? So girls should make sure the guy knows, hey, I do like you. Just
yes, I think that's fair.
Yeah. And what are some easy ways in your mind that a girl could do that? And just show,
oh, wow.
like, here's
this is funny. And I love that you're asking this question. And I'm obviously by no means speaking on expertise or a lot of experience.
I'm just saying, what would you want?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny.
Because you've probably had a lot more time than other people to think about this.
Sure, that is true. I will take that as a form of like expertise. Like, yes, I've been in the waiting game in the market for a while, right? Yeah. You know what? I think here's the thing. I think it comes down to the way people receive love, and so one of the biggest things for me is quality time, and actually getting quality time inside groups with girls has actually says a lot about what they think of me. And that's hard too, because some people are just quality time people, but they're not meaning anything like that.
And you're referring to the 5 love languages when you say that?
Sure, yeah, something probably, yeah, you're right. That's what I am referring to, I guess. Yeah, man, it's a great question, and I don't think I've actually thought about this enough to give like one where I'm like, yeah, this is the right answer. I do feel like when you spend time with somebody, even as friends, there's a way that you look at somebody, it means something.
Yeah.
There's a way that when everybody else is talking, you're just talking to that person, that means something.
Yeah.
What I think girls could probably be more careful with.
Come on.
Is flirting. Because flirting is manipulation. It's getting attention to make you feel a certain way, even though you have no desire to actually act upon what you're saying.
Okay.
And guys do this as well. I'm sorry.
I'm not pushing back as much as saying, what if a girl doesn't realize she's flirting? She's just being kind.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that is true. Because so you know me as well. Like I cannot tell you how many. We
are both those type of people. Exactly, and we get into trouble for that.
No, exactly. There's a significant amount of girls in my life that are very angry. That were at one point very angry at me.
I mean, you have a very punchable face.
No, I know. Thank you. I appreciate it. No, but in what it was exactly that. I didn't realize what I was doing was communicating something else, because I was just trying to be nice. And you know what? The harmful thing to that is then I had to start operating in a way that I didn't think was actually genuine. I was just trying to be a little more distant. Like, no, I'm not going to be this overly nice, chivalrous kind of guy, because girls think when I'm doing that I like them, kind of thing. So that is hard. I will say, like, and it happens on both sides, and you're right. This is where I think community is so important. I was very grateful to have guys in my life to say, hey, when you do this is what it's communicating to a girl. And the same thing with girls, having girls in your life that are willing to say, no, I know you think you're just being funny. I think but what you're actually doing there is you're flirting. And if you don't know you're flirting, I'm letting you know you are, right? Because it is okay to do that and not know what you're doing. Yeah. It's not okay to then justify it once you're being told. And that's the beautiful thing about community. That's another thing why I love, like, actually Christian community of guys in my life that could actually call me out for my own BS and saying, Lou, you can say this, you can mean this, but this is what it's communicating, and you don't have the ability from this point forward of saying, oh, I didn't know. No, you do know. Yeah. And so I've had to be very careful. It's like, okay, so what do I do when I communicate these things? So yeah, but I'm sorry. So I wish I had a better answer. I don't have enough, like,
No, but I think you gave an action step with that.
Okay,
It doesn't
sure.
need to be a clear-cut
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
It's just you have to learn to navigate it.
Yeah.
And that's it. You have to be intentional about
Yeah.
navigating it.
Yeah.
And making sure that you are taking action.
And you can do it with a lot of fun because you know it's not your identity. That's the key to all this. And I know we started there with contentment, but the reason why I think you can do this with an aspect of like joy and just like, oh, this would be nice, and not like this will shatter me if it doesn't work. The only reason why this will shatter you is if you find your identity in your ability to find a spouse. Start working on that before you start entertaining relationships. And I know that's hard, and I don't know how long that'll take, but in a real note, like, would you actually entertain this idea of like, okay, am I just all right with who I am? And I thought that sounds so cheap and like almost like new age.
I'm just
religion.
being me,
Yeah,
you know?
it's like new age religion. I don't mean like find yourself. I'm not saying that. Like,
Yeah.
but are you genuinely okay with who you are? Are you content in what God has already given you, or are you coveting other things? Are you coveting other relationships? Because that's actually what
It's so
that's what it is,
challenging.
and it's
Yeah.
gosh, it's so challenging, and it's okay to struggle with it. The thing is, it's an everyday battle, and the only thing I've noticed in my own life is like with the everyday battles, with something like pornography, with something like this, it's when you consistently do that everyday battle, you without even realizing, you realize those battles are no longer, and they just disappear.
Unpack.
Yeah, I would say. Yeah, gosh, there was a point in my life for sure that I really desired a relationship, and it became an identity thing for me. And then I started to own that. It's something I wrote down. It's something I talked about God with every day. Same thing with pornography. Oh my gosh, man. I wish the moment I said, holy crap, like this is wrong, I want this out, I wish it was gone.
Yeah.
And it wasn't.
Yep.
And I was like, gosh, God, I want this out. Can you please help me? And I just remember falling and getting back up and falling and getting back up and falling. And then I started falling less and less. And then it'd be months without falling. And that's what I mean. It's like the more you're willing to battle these things every single day and not, I think we're a culture of immediate satisfaction, immediate gratification. And so if we're doing, no wonder why we're frustrated with how long something's taking. But the beautiful thing about the process of these things is that it builds a form of endurance, and it builds a sense of maturity and character, because that's actually what we want. We want a character that can sustain where God is taking us. Well, one of those things is when you are willing to every single day face that thing and just fight it as much as you can. You address it. It's you're being careful as to what you watch, because you know, when I watch these types of films, this is how I feel. When you do those types of things, I think what I've seen in my own life is like, oh wow, like I don't think about that often anymore. I'm not struggling with that, because, like I said, I think I have an odd disposition right now when it comes to singleness. Like I feel like most guys my age, especially Christian guys, they're just biting at the bit. They just want to be married.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of girls are as well.
Yeah.
I don't want to take complete credit for that and saying I'm just really self-disciplined. And I think the Lord's given me a disposition because of what I'm doing, and when He chooses to change it, that's great. But like that, I will say that disposition of being content was not just there at all times. It was something that I slowly grew into as I was doing my best to make wise decisions and to take captive every thought, and to be very, very careful as to the things I'd entertain myself to.
That's so good. And that's so good that I actually am going to end the podcast episode right here.
Great.
And we're going to do a part 2.
Whew, I hope you found that conversation to be as rich as I did. And before I forget, I wanted to just shout out Lou, 1, for being awesome, but 2, if you want to follow along on all of his adventures, his speaking engagements, and his conversations, then be sure to give him a follow on Instagram. His handle is at lou.phil.life. So lou.phil.life. So some of my big takeaways for this episode. Are we being alert to make sure we aren't cheapening who people actually are behind their physical appearance? Number 2, the scariest thing in life is not about having an answer to the question, what is the meaning of life? But rather, the scariest thing in life is pursuing the thing that you think is the meaning of life and finding it empty. Number 3, it's okay to say, I want that, maybe referring to marriage, but also recognize at the same time that God is good, and therefore God is not withholding any good gifts from me. Number 4, it's extremely hard to emulate something you may not have seen an example of before, but it's not impossible. In fact, Lou has made it so abundantly clear that he refers to and looks to scripture as his guide map, his roadmap, his plan for best practices as to how to live a life filled with faith. And I think the same example and precedent can be set for all of us. So don't get deterred just because maybe you haven't seen an example of what is laid out in the Bible or what you are hoping for in your future, in marriage, and in your time in singleness as well. Number 5, we need to treat others not as someone who can offer or give something to you, but rather as an entity in themselves and someone created in the image of God, meaning that we don't want to violate the sacredness of that. Number 6, on the topic of flirting, Lou dropped the mic with this one line because it wasn't just referring to this, but this is a life principle right here. And here's what he said. It's okay to do that and not realize what you're doing, but it's not okay to try and justify it once it's been brought to your attention. Yeesh! I mean, he hit the nail on the head with that one. And especially for conversations like these, I, of course, want to know what some of your takeaways were. So be sure to comment them below. And if you enjoyed this conversation, I'm going to bet you're also going to love the conversation I had with my friend Mackenzie on the topic of church hurt. So if you are interested in that, make sure you click this link right here. Guys, thank you so much as usual, and I'll see you in the next video.